Welcome and thank you very much for joining us on episode 138 of the Blazers Edge podcast, presented to you today by blazersedge.com. I'm your weekend host, Chris Lucia.
And I'm your weekend co-host, Brandon Goldner. You can always get in touch with the Blazers Edge Weekend Podcast at blazersedgepodcast@gmail.com. And please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. We definitely appreciate those reviews, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. Please let us know what you think of the show.
Joining us this weekend on the Blazers Edge podcast is B-Ball Breakdown contributor James Holas. James, thanks for coming on the show this week, man.
Dude, this is like deja vu. It's like we already did this before.
No, it almost is, because I think we just went for about 45 minutes and then we realized that Brandon did not press the record button, or we had some other technical difficulties there. So I want to say from the very top here, thank you very much for sticking around, James. This is going to be the first time that the Blazers Edge listeners hear you on this podcast. But for Brandon and I, this is going to be round number 2. So again, we really appreciate that.
No problem, man. Hey, Brandon, how does it feel when that number 7 bus ran over your back right now?
In totally unrelated news, Blazers Edge is looking for a new social media editor and weekend podcast co-host. So if you know anyone who's interested.
Just like I planned it. I'm putting my application in tomorrow.
Oh man.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we gave an on-air shout out to you, James, for sticking around on a Friday night, because Brandon and I and the Blazers Edge listeners, definitely appreciate that. So let's, that being said, let's get right into this, because there's a lot going on around the NBA. You're a guy for B-Ball Breakdown who covers the entire league. You cover, everything that's going on. You kind of get, more or less a national perspective. I know that you're kind of, or in the past, you've been, kind of a Celtics fan. So we can talk about some potential Celtics talk a little bit. Maybe look at how their players are valued, compared to the Blazers roster, how they're valued. Maybe get the perspective of, a fan from another team where the Blazers, players are valued across the league. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I do want to talk about, I want to start with Dwight Howard, because he's been kind of making the rounds recently on national media. It seems like there was a lot of clamoring, last season, early this season, the way things happened with Kevin McHale, how he got let go. And then the Rockets just kind of imploding, and then what happened in the playoffs for them. And it seems, that $23.5 million player option that he has this year, it also, or for next season, it seems all but confirmed, that he's gonna decline that player option and try to get into free agency. So he's been going around trying to rehab his image a bit. It seems, he was on TNT in an interview. He was with Jackie McMullen of ESPN. He did an interview a couple days ago, just kind of trying to, I don't really know exactly what he was trying to, it sounded like he was being honest. I don't know if that honesty is really going to pay dividends for him, what he's looking to do, by being that honest. But I just want to ask you right off the top, Dwight Howard, what do things kind of look like for him as a 30-year-old heading into free agency with the kind of miles that he has on his body and the history that he has?
I think for Dwight, the chickens have come home to roost. He's always wanted to be, quote unquote, be himself, and he's kind of marched to his own drum. And I think in Orlando that hurt him. He called it being honest. I'll call it. He was kind of disloyal to Stan Van Gundy, and it, stabbed him in the back. Other than that, though, I think he's been kind of unfairly mistreated in a lot of ways. He's a complex guy, and I think it's a complex situation. For some reason, I think he let it get to him. All the talk about, hey, Shaq and dominant big man, 30 and 15. So I think he kind of wanted to prove himself, but that's just not who he is. And even now, he's at his best in the pick and roll. He's still a game changing defender. He can still be a top notch rebounder. But if you watch him out there, he's so awkward and stiff, and he's still making these boneheaded fouls like he's a rookie. It's a very complex situation. Is he worth a lot to the right team? Sure. He could be. We saw just 2 years ago for Houston what he did in the playoffs. He was amazing. This year, not so much. but he's not that far removed from being a dominant big man. But the league has moved on. Golden State has come, and they forced an evolution on the league where, just being a hulking strong big man is not enough. You got to be mobile. You got to be versatile. You got to be able to pass. And he hadn't shown the ability to do that. Speaking of that article he did with ESPN, it's bothersome to read, a top tier player say, I was so scared of messing up and failing that I didn't want to try new things in the game. So as a new GM or front office, it'd give me pause before I threw a lot of money at him. But there'll be so much money to throw, somebody's gonna throw the money at him.
So one thing, and you nailed it. Blazers fans definitely remember that series a couple years ago where the Blazers advanced against Houston, but Dwight Howard had an absolutely incredible first couple games in particular, and early on in both of those games too. He looked totally unstoppable. That was a couple years ago now, but one thing you mentioned, Dwight Howard's attitude. So from what I've seen from the kind of image rehabilitation that Dwight Howard has done on TNT, and now this piece with Jackie McMullen at ESPN that you were just referring to, I'm just wondering, do you think that Dwight Howard, is he at the point of his career where, maybe he's feeling his own mortality a little bit? He realizes the league is changing. He realizes he only has so many more years left to really kind of cement his legacy. Do you think that he's the type of player who would, kind of take maybe a tertiary role, kind of a third best player role with the team? Or do you really think that Dwight Howard wants to be the first or second best player on the team, even now, even given his age and even given his injury history?
I think that it's easy for us to sit here and say, because I'm with you. I think if he could kind of subjugate his ego a little bit and step back and be just more of a rebounder, defender, and dirty work player, and be content with scoring 12 points a game, I think he would definitely benefit the team a lot more. But NBA players have egos, and this guy is a multiple Defensive Player of the Year winner. He's been a 20-point a game scorer. It's really hard for him to say, hey, if he feels he's that way, it's hard to tell him, hey man, we need you to step back and let these other guys shine. So I know that I think he knows how he's perceived. I think a lot of the league perceives him as a joke, and he kind of knows this. And I think he wants to change that. So I think winning might be a higher priority. But to really step back and say, hey, I'm the third option, I don't know, man. Let's put him in relation to Portland. Portland needs another star. Portland doesn't need a lot of. I think Portland's a lot closer than people think. I wrote them off at the beginning of the season. I had no clue that they'd be as good as they were. So I tip my hat to the staff, to what Dame did. CJ really showed up. So yeah, they just need one more player there. I don't think Dwight Howard's the type of player they need, because he's gonna totally take away from that, the free flowing offense. That ball kind of hops and it moves, and when the ball's moving, like I watched against Golden State, when that ball started moving, all of a sudden everybody's in rhythm, and they're Crab's hitting shots, Aminu's hitting shots. So I don't think Dwight Howard is exactly what they need personality wise or complete fit wise. They need somebody, a younger big, get up and down the floor, rebounder. Look, who'd be great? Steve Adams would be great there. He's not coming there right now, of course, because he's a restricted free agent. But that kind of player, I think Dwight's the wrong fit for Portland.
I would love to see Steven Adams in a Portland uniform myself.
Hey, you almost had Cantor. You almost had the other Stash brother.
Oh no, not so much him. Although he's gotten better. He went from being like unwatchable on defense to being like quasi tolerable. It's just always weird. It's like, how can you have such good offensive footwork and then on defense, just wow. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
No, the Blazers do obviously need a big. They need, they need probably a couple pieces. I think they could use, depending on how the chips fall in free agency for the players that they have in restricted and unrestricted free agency. The Blazers themselves, and then the guys that they decide to bring in. They could use probably some backcourt help. They could potentially need some help on the wings, but I think the most glaring need is their, in the front court. I think they need kind of a rim protecting big, somebody who can, make a difference on the defensive end. I don't know if, Mason Plumlee and Ed Davis can really hold that down if the Blazers are really hoping to take that next step. So I want to talk a little bit about, the Blazers' chances of landing an impact an impactful big, a guy that can, protect the rim, change the flow of the game for them on defense. A few years ago when they had Robin Lopez, he wasn't an elite center by any stretch, but they were able to have a top 10 defense, with the system that Terry Stotts designed. So I want to start, shoot big here. Are there any max level front court players? We already discussed the potential of Dwight Howard. What about a guy like Hassan Whiteside? That's a guy that we've been talking about a lot.
No. Me personally, if you guys want Whiteside, more power to you. I don't want Hassan Whiteside anywhere near my team, and I don't think I want to see him in Portland. I get he's a great shot blocker. He's an awesome rebounder when he's engaged. He can even score a little bit. He has decent touch around the rim when he's rolling. My problem with him is there's a reason that he's 26 and just getting big NBA minutes. There's a reason that he had spent 2 years overseas. Hey, players do change. People mature and grow up. But even this past season, we saw moments when Wade and Bosch were a little frustrated with him, and Coach Spo was frustrated with Whiteside and the way his attitude and the way he was playing. So, that's a really strong franchise over there in Miami. And not saying Portland's not a strong franchise, but it's different. They don't have the strong personalities like Pat Riley and Dwayne Wade. So I wouldn't want to maybe upset the chemistry, which is so underrated in Portland. Portland's chemistry is, that's what got you guys in the playoffs.
I mean, I would say it goes from Neil Olshey down to Terry Stotts and then through Damian Lillard, and then all, throughout the team. They definitely have a culture. They definitely have chemistry. I mean, my question is, and this is something that Blazers Edge managing editor Dave Deckard, this is an argument he's made in the past for players like Larry Sanders, if he were ready to make a return to the NBA, that maybe the Blazers, because of that strong culture, that perhaps they could absorb maybe one player, that didn't quite fit into that. How does that argument resonate with you at all? Do you think the Blazers might be a team that could absorb a player like Whiteside because of the fact that they do have a strong culture?
I want to say yeah, but then at the other end of the spectrum, I want to say Andrew Bynum. Sometimes a player is just so into his own world that it doesn't matter. I think Bynum with the Philly, and even though he didn't play, he kind of cast a sour cloud over the whole team. He went to Indiana, and I think he certainly didn't help. I would love to see a player like Al Horford go to Portland. I mean, that would be a dream fit. He's older, he's mature, he needs somebody to carry the offensive weight, but I think he can still anchor a defense. You might not really see everything he's capable of in Atlanta right now. He's a professional. He does exactly what Coach Bud asked him to do, and he's not asked to take 15 shots a game. But I think in a more traditional system like Portland, I think we would see Al Horford. I mean, he was a 20 and 10 guy for a couple of years in Atlanta. He wouldn't need to be that, but he has that kind of talent. So, yeah, I can hear what you're saying, where the culture's strong enough to get maybe an outlier kind of guy to buy in. But I wouldn't want to take that risk if I was Portland. That's just me.
So you bring up a guy like Al Horford, who seems to be a target for a lot of Blazer fans when they're kind of dreaming about this upcoming offseason. And historically speaking, Portland hasn't been very successful at signing top level free agents. It hasn't seemed to be a very popular free agent destination for the top level guys across the league. For whatever reason, I think this year it seems to be like there's kind of a bit of a different attitude among fans to maybe, they're always going to be optimistic, but it seems like, I mean, at least from my perspective, it seems like it's more realistic now to maybe pursue a guy, like an Al Horford, somebody who would command a max level contract as an unrestricted free agent. I want to ask you as someone, you're watching the NBA from San Diego, so you're several hours away from Portland outside of the bubble that Brandon and I are in here. How do you view Portland now as a potential free agent destination? And what are the reasons why you think, if you think so, why they, potentially have a better chance at landing a top free agent now as opposed to in years past? Okay,
so full disclosure, I'm a terrible Celtics fan. I wasn't happy with them making the playoffs last year because nothing, to me, it wasn't a tank, but they were going to fall into the lottery. And when we missed that chance, it's a chance of missing you missed out on a potential franchise altering player. So I keep hearing people say that, oh, Boston is a great team. All we need is one star in Boston, and they're contenders. I disagree with that, because that one star would be surrounded by role players. And as good as that sounds, I mean, that was LeBron James for years. When you're good enough to win a lot of games and win a couple playoff series, but you're not going to contend against the big guns that have LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love. So I look at a team like Portland and think that's really that should be the free agent destination, because they already have something that every free agent wants to play with. They want to play with another star, and they already have Dame, who's young, very talented, and on the rise. They already have a great secondary scorer, somebody just a pure scorer in CJ McCollum. They already have young, long, athletic bigs and wings. It's almost like it's perfectly made. All you got to do is slide in a top free agent, and Portland's going to be right there with anybody.
So you brought up playoff experience and advancing in the playoffs being a reason why free agents would potentially look at a team and say, this is why I would want to go there. They made it to the postseason. This is something they could potentially replicate in the future. So I want to talk about this a little bit, kind of rehash this conversation, with hindsight being 2020 now. Back in, I think it was roughly January, maybe February, kind of before the Blazers went on this late season tear and got into the 5th seed, and it looked like they could actually do some damage in the playoffs. We were, as Blazer fans and people who watch the Blazers and cover the Blazers, we were all talking about, would it be worth it for the Blazers to make the playoffs this year and lose against a team like the Spurs or the Warriors in the first round, or they had that Aaron Aflalo trade last spring where they traded their future first rounder. It was lottery protected, so if the Blazers made the playoffs this year, they would lose their draft pick. If they missed the playoffs, they would be in the lottery this season. So obviously they made the playoffs. We were talking about if it would be worth it for the Blazers to potentially keep that draft pick and stay in the lottery versus that playoff experience. So looking back now, the Blazers went a lot further than we all anticipated they would go when they were sitting at 11-20 in late December or in January, whenever that was. And that surprised everybody, I think, across the league, let alone Blazer fans. So with that unprecedented, or I should say that unexpected success, advancing to the second round against the Golden State Warriors, I want to ask you, James, looking at a young team like the Blazers, fighting to make the playoffs, getting there the way that they did, and beating the Clippers in 6 games, and then taking the Warriors to 5 games, and it sounds kind of weird to say, but it was oddly competitive. I think those 4 losses that they took to the Warriors, I think, or at least 3 out of the 4 were hard fought for the Warriors. So what is this kind of playoff experience? What is this whole concept? What can the Blazers take from playing a team like the Warriors in the second round and playing 5 games against a historically good team like them?
So it's weird because I think that whole, hey, make the playoffs is it's such great experience. I think in a lot of cases it's overstated. Like last year when Boston made it, they got their heads beaten in 4 games. It didn't make a difference. What do you really learn? And the fact that in Boston, we know everyone's tradable for the Celtics. And in a couple of years, the team is going to look totally different. Maybe 2 or 3 guys will be holdovers. So what experience does that mean? Not much. In a case like Portland, the Blazers came together, and it's not luck. It's not like it wasn't some fluke that they made the playoffs. They played really well all season. So that kind of effort, night in and night out, not only is it good for the team, and it builds confidence, and guys are getting quality minutes and reps, and you get to the playoffs, and the lights go up, and the intensity turns up, and that kind of experience for those guys are good. Also, it shows prospective free agents, hey, listen, this team, there's no quit here. We're professionals. We come to play. We punch above our heads. That says a lot to the incoming free agents. So in this case, yeah, the old cliche about playoff, it's for the experience. I think it would be worth more than trying to, or not even trying, I guess, if they miss the playoffs and they pick 12 or pick 13. Because this team is not trying to rebuild right now. They're retooling on the fly. With all the cap space, the young players on great contracts, the flexibility, it's a pretty good bet that this summer is going to go well, and it probably next year, a higher seed, more help, go deeper in the playoffs. So, yeah, I agree. This year making the playoffs was definitely a boon for Portland.
And so that's something that you heard the Portland Trailblazers president of basketball operations Neil Olshey said in a very recent in a recent news conference that the Blazers were trying to make their free agent pitch last year, and what Neil Olshey claimed that he heard was players saying, "Oh, we like Damian Lillard, we like your team, but I don't think I'm going to be the piece that's going to get you over the hump." And what Neil Olshey has said recently is, well, now the Blazers can point to the fact that they got to the second round. Yes, albeit, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin get injured. I mean, to be fair to the Blazers, they were leading, halfway through game 4, potentially could have tied that series. But obviously, winning 4 games in a row in that first round series against the Clippers, that's not going to happen if Chris Paul and Blake Griffin don't go down. But do you believe Neil Olshey when Neil Olshey says that, but for the fact that the Blazers, didn't look like they were going to make the playoffs, maybe they could have grabbed a free agent. Do you believe him when he says that? Do you think that would make the difference for a free agent, just seeing the playoff success the Blazers have had this year?
I go back and forth with this. It's in some cases yes, in some cases no, and I say in this particular case, Dame had a superstar turn this year. I admit I was a little down on Dame, a little lukewarm about him. He coming into this season, he had stretches where he'd be very inconsistent. He'll be hot for 2 months, come out the gates really, white hot. Then January, February timeframe, he's shooting 30% from 3 for like almost a month and a half, 2 months. And so his defense, leaves a lot to be desired. So coming into this season, I had him, maybe 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th best point guard in the league. But watching him this year, he showed a lot of growth. He showed a lot of patience, and more than the stats, the way he held that team together and he made things happen. He always believed. A big win that sticks out to me is when they beat OKC. Oh, they were down, and then Dame, like the last 3 minutes, he just went freaking. I don't know. I've rarely seen anything like that. Steph Curry comes to mind, but he went bonkers and they beat OKC. And it just shows you how tough this team is. So yeah, I can see a free agent that's picking between, a couple other also-rans, and they look at what they have in Dame Lillard, and Dame Dollar and CJ, and it might make a difference.
So we're kind of bringing up Steph Curry here. And earlier on in the week for B-Ball Breakdown, you wrote about Steph Curry and Russ Westbrook, kind of their, the way that their two styles, they're both superstar players, and they're both players that can change the way, change the flow of a game and affect an opposing team's defense in the way that very few players in the league can. And they just do it in such different ways. Steph being more of that kind of laser-like sniper who can just pick off teams from a distance with surgeon-like precision, more or less. Russ Westbrook being more of that kind of bowling ball that's just going to roll right through an opposing team and kind of force his will on opponents and create opportunities for his teammates in an entirely different way than Steph Curry does with his floor spacing. So, those are both elite level point guards in the NBA. And that's kind of what the article on B-Ball Breakdown was more or less about. But I want to talk about Damian Lillard here, how he kind of fits into this conversation, because I'm reading the descriptors for Steph Curry and Russ Westbrook in your piece, and I'm kind of saying, well, Dame has a little bit of that. I mean, he has the ability to pull up, from 25 feet with a hand in his face off the dribble and make opposing teams have to defend him, out that far. He can do a lot of damage in the pick and roll. He drives very well. He finishes pretty well. He creates for his teammates with his driving the way that Russell Westbrook does. Now, I'm not going to say that he's as good as either of those players are at their best attributes or the way that they affect games, but Dame seems to have a little bit of both players, more or less. I think when I'm kind of looking at the way that they impact games. So, talking about the national conversation here where Dame fits with elite point guards. I think there's obviously the MVP Steph Curry, Russ Westbrook's up there, Chris Paul. Where does Damian Lillard fit among the elite point guards following the 2015-2016 season?
Yeah, and like I said, I've kind of done not a 180, but I view him in a different light. And like you just know, Steph Curry is the scalpel, Russell Westbrook is the hammer. Dame is something else because he takes the outrageous 30-footers. He comes down with the dribble and he'll just pull up in your eye. But I didn't realize until watching him this year, and I apologize to Portland fans. I didn't pay enough attention. The guy can put his head down and get to the hole, and he's sneakily athletic. He'll go up and put one on your head. So he gets it done. He has the little fadeaways. He has the runners, the floaters. Dame. The only knock you really have on Dame is his defense, which it is what it is. A young player, he needs to improve defensively. But coming into the season, I had him 7th, 8th, good guard, but not one of the top flight ones. This year, I put him up there in that right below that top tier of Russell Westbrook. Steph, of course, being number one, Russ, Chris Paul. And then, there's maybe a half step behind him. I got Dame. John Wall was my guy right there. But, look, let's be real. Wall's fast. He's a great passer. But he has to dominate the ball in a way with his passing. And the shooting is so inconsistent. If me personally, if I'm building a team, I want a guy who can flat out score for me. So I think Dame is more valuable in today's.
Yeah, and before I throw it back to Chris, I just want to slide this in there that Russell Westbrook had some nice things to say about Damian Lillard recently. And I don't know how much of this is posturing, obviously, the Oklahoma City Thunder facing the Golden State Warriors in these Western Conference Finals. But Russell Westbrook was asked a question about how do you prepare to guard Steph Curry, and Westbrook said something to the effect of, well, it's nothing I haven't seen before because, it's like Damian Lillard, a player like that. So obviously Damian Lillard did for sure get better this year and is gaining the respect of his peers around the league for sure.
So I want to make sure personally that I'm not, overcompensating by trying to remain unbiased by going so far in the other direction to where I'm, undervaluing Blazers, players on the roster. So I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit, James. I want to throw some hypothetical trade scenarios your way.
Let's do it.
As a guy who covers the whole league and is a fan of an East Coast team, or has been a fan and knows a little bit about the entire NBA here, let's kind of throw out some hypothetical trades here. So one that we've been kicking around a little bit on the Blazers Edge Slack channel that we use to talk a little bit is getting involved with some of Philly's draft picks. So one package that was thrown out was CJ McCollum, Al-Farouq Aminu, Ed Davis, or Mason Plumlee, and Noah Vonleh, traded to Philadelphia for Jahlil Okafor, last year's number 3 pick, and this year's number 1 overall pick. So, James, to start off with the hypothetical scenarios, is that something that is realistic to you, or is that overvaluing Blazers players?
So the person who proposed this was Phil Jackson, because they must have been on peyote. That is nuts. Look, those are fine. The Blazers 1 through 9, 1 through 10, like I said, are fine players. That is ridiculous to think that you would get not just Okafor, but the pick for those players.
Okay, so what would the Blazers have to throw in? Is there a future pick they could throw in? I mean, as far as I can tell, Blazers fans aren't willing to part with Damian Lillard. So is there anything short of Dame that gets that trade done? For
the number 3 pick and for Okafor?
For the number 1 overall pick this year.
For number 1 pick and Okafor? I'm pretty sure that's a non-starter unless coming from Portland, Dame had to be involved.
Okay, so I guess moving on to maybe talking about a team that you're familiar with, fellow Blazers Edge contributor Evans Clinchy also follows the Boston Celtics. A shout out to him if he's listening.
Evan, what's up, homie?
They have 3 picks this year. They have the number 3 overall pick in the lottery, the number 16 in the first round, and the number 23 in the first round. Blazers GM Neil O'Shea has kind of talked a bit recently about how he's going to be potentially looking to get involved in the draft as he does every year. There's been rumors that they've been meeting up with potential lottery picks. So, there's kind of some talk that maybe the Blazers are looking to get involved in the lottery or get involved in the first round of the draft this year somehow. So looking at what the Blazers have on their roster, top to bottom, I want to ask, what would it take, in your opinion, to get that number 3 overall pick from Celtics GM Danny Ainge?
Okay, so full disclosure, I'd be a terrible personnelman because I'm just not very bright when it comes to salary cap info and probably talent evaluation and matching. But from my perspective, if you want this number 3 pick from Boston, you got to, again, we're going to have to talk the number 3 pick and maybe IT2, Isaiah Thomas, and we're going to have to talk Dame involved.
Nothing short of Dame gets the Blazers that number 3 pick, in your opinion?
Yeah, if I'm giving up the number 3 pick, which again is going to be a top flight college talent with all kind of upside and at a very very reasonable price for the next few years that was built around. If I'm giving that up, I need to get back a lot of value in return. So I don't trust Ainge drafting anything past 10. So if I'm gonna give up a lotto pick, it better be for something worthwhile.
Let me throw out one more scenario. We don't need to go through every possible permutation. But what about something like, and we talked about this in our previous failed attempt to record this podcast. What about something like CJ McCollum and like a Noah Vonleh, who's not getting a ton of run in Portland and maybe like a future first? McCollum, Vonleh, future first for this number 3 pick. How does that sound to you as a Celtics fan?
No. Again, no. I love CJ McCollum, but if you look at what Boston already has, they already have a volume shooting guard. I think CJ's a little more efficient, but that's fine. They already have Smart. They already have Bradley. They already have a cadre of guards. And as much as it would help to get a scorer like CJ, no, that wouldn't be worth it.
All right. So what about that number 16 pick? Is there anything, if you're looking up and down the Blazers roster, that seems realistic for you that doesn't include Damian Lillard?
Oh, for sure. For the 16 again, because Ainge can't draft, 16 is that's like his Achilles heel. Look, that's how we got Terry Rozier and freaking James Young. They took James Young when Rodney Hood was on the board. I remember just like yanking my hair out. But yeah, definitely. Like let's say even this might be even almost too much. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about. Aminu and like Crab, and yeah, those two they're really good wings. And if they combined, a 16th pick doesn't have a really good chance to be as good as those two combined. So yeah, why not? Or Aminu and Gerald Henderson. Yeah, I'd give up a 16 pick for that.
I'll just give you fair warning that any potential trade involving Alan Crabb is going to make Chris Lucia cry for sure. I mean, Chris, I know you're Alan Crabb's biggest fan. Don't even deny it.
Cool Breeze is kind of he's kind of this year he's been kind of the closest player that I've followed on the Blazers. If I as a fan, I like to pick kind of a favorite guy to follow and really kind of irrationally support and root for. And he was that guy. He was the 15th man basically 3 years ago, his rookie year. He only played 600 minutes last season. So I just thought it would be fun to kind of irrationally root for him this season. I like the guy, I like his personality. I'd hate to see him go. So unfortunately, I'm not willing to part with Alan Crabb for the number 16 pick, but he will be a restricted free agent this summer, so we may see him changing uniforms either way. I don't even want to think about it. But to kind of wrap this potential, hypothetical trade talk scenario here, that number 23 pick, we saw the Blazers trade, an early 20s pick or a low 20s pick last offseason along with Steve Blake to the Nets, which brought them back Mason Plumlee. So what kind of similar value do you see on the Blazers roster there that could maybe get them into the low 20s there if they're dealing with the Boston Celtics?
Well, a quick aside, Alan Crabb, I keep saying this, I think he looks like Nick Young's final form. So no, yeah, 23rd pick. So then you can gamble with potential. You're looking for a serviceable role player or maybe somebody with a lot of potential. Yeah, Noah Vonleh. Give me Noah Vonleh for that 23rd pick. He's still really young. He's so long. I know he has a pretty inauspicious start to his career so far, but I mean, the kid has a lot of tools, and yeah, he's so young. So, yeah, Vonleh, and maybe I don't know, throw in Tim Frazier for us for the hell of it.
Oh, Tim, see, they'd have to. The Blazers waived him earlier on in the season to make room for Anderson Varejao and Brian Roberts. I know he was Damian Lillard's BFF. We were all really surprised to see Tim Frazier go, but that does give us an idea of the kind of value that the Blazers would have to throw out there. I mean, Tim Frazier was not a massive impact player, so
he's done super super well in New Orleans though. By the way, especially the last half of the year. He's really coming to his own. And just really quick, just talking about that number 23 pick. I was pretty upset actually when the Blazers made that trade for Mason Plumlee, got rid of Rondae Hollis Jefferson. I mean, there was like an hour there where I was all in on Rondae Hollis Jefferson, and then he was just gone, just like that. Bummer.
It's funny because for both you guys, because Alan Crabb was like one of my favorite players to watch during this playoff run. I don't know why, but something about the guy, and I like him. And then Rondae Hollis Jefferson, I last year I started doing my draft research, and he just jumped off the screen at me. So when Portland picked him, I'm like, oh, that's all right, man. That's a good pick. And yeah, I was kind of like, why would you pick him and then move him like that? So yeah.
No, so they brought in Mason Plumlee. It could be debated. We didn't get to see much of Rondae Hollis Jefferson this year, I don't believe, because I think he got hurt early on and missed a decent amount of games. And then, we were kind of wondering, could he make outside shots at the NBA level? That's kind of, if you're a wing on the Blazers, that's kind of, fitting into Terry Stotts' offense. That's kind of what you're hoping to see. And that was kind of a question mark for him. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see much of that. But I think we're getting to the end of this podcast. James, I want to ask you, off the top of your head, because it seems like, you've been a huge NBA fan for a number of years. You've been covering the league for a while. I just want to ask, do you have any teams from the past, Portland Trailblazers teams, that you can remember fondly, and vice versa? Do you have, or conversely, do you have guys, or were there iterations of the Blazers or specific players that you didn't like as much?
That's a real nice way of calling me old, and I appreciate that, brother. So yeah, I'm going to show my age right now. I remember the first Clyde MJ matchup. Like, that was a big deal. And, Terry Porter was awesome. Cliff, good news. Like, I remember when Cliff Levingston.
Cliff Robinson?
Cliff Robinson. I remember when Cliff Levingston was with the Blazers for a minute. But yeah, Cliff Robinson was the guy. But no, yeah, good news. Cliff Levingston was there too. Buck Williams, Kevin Duckworth, the Duck. So that was a really complete team, man. Just deep, played hard, fun. Then my man Scottie Pippen on Twitter, I'm Snotty Drippin', an homage to Scottie. I think Chicago they did a bad job with how they handled him and Mike, and Scottie left and went to Portland, and Portland instantly became contenders. Of course, they had other players too, but Scottie was a big part of that, and just such a great all around player. And that slowly morphed into the Jailblazers. And that was really ugly, man. I remember reading an article about they had a Christmas PR thing, and Rashid was standing over there with a Santa hat on, but the Blazers weren't talking to fans. They were just there. It was just such a weird experience because they were so talented. I think that's when they had Travis Outlaw. It was just such a weird toxic team, and I'm glad they did the right thing eventually, but because for such a proud franchise, that was probably one of the, and maybe you guys could, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, it seemed like one of the low spots in the franchise history.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, as someone myself who's been following the Blazers since the late '80s, before I even knew how to dribble a basketball, to go from teams like that to a team where you're rooting as hard as you can for Darius Miles. Right, I mean, that was harsh for sure. That was not very much fun for Blazers fans at all.
So, as Blazer fans, James, and we'll wrap here after this. we don't like necessarily. There's certain guys from other teams that you just can't stand matching up with. Patrick Beverley is the first guy that comes to mind for me, where you're just like, man, that guy is a pest, and I don't even know if he were on the Blazers if I would really appreciate his antics. That's how much I think how difficult it is to watch him play against the Blazers. Back in the day, for me, it was Brian freaking Cardinal. Like, I just could not stand watching the guy play for whatever reason. Just not a huge fan of that dude. So, James, was there ever anyone on the Blazers? I mean, Joel Prisbill is the first guy that comes to mind to throw out. Was there a goon ever?
So a Blazer that I just could not stand, or I just really just did not like.
To make this conversation super negative to end on, I guess.
Yeah, let's really take it down to the abyss.
Yeah.
That's really tough though, because Blazers have honestly been a pretty likable team. You know what? Here, I'm gonna say it. LaMarcus Aldridge, never a fan. Never a fan. So, it's funny because when he was with the Blazers and he was getting all the accolades, people were like, well, the best power forward, is it him? Is it Kevin Love? Or is it who else was in discussion a couple years ago? Blake Griffin. Best power. I'm like, dude, if I shoot the ball 24 times a night, I'm gonna score 25 points. And look, I guess my thing with him, it seems like I got the impression that he wasn't very, and I don't know where I get this from, that he wasn't very pleased with the attention that Dame got, and that I don't know why it seemed like he was a difficult power forward to play with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and part of it too, it's an interesting dynamic if you think about the history of LaMarcus Aldridge. Was drafted number 2. And then during that same draft, the Blazers picked Brandon Roy after him. And then who is it that became the franchise player almost immediately? It was Brandon Roy. So then you have LaMarcus Aldridge feeling like he's in the shadow of somebody else. Brandon Roy's knees turn into dust. Odin's knees turn into dust. Also a bummer for Blazers fans. And then he has a period of time where it's LaMarcus Aldridge and no one else. And then here comes Damian Lillard, very not effervescent, kind of a quiet leader type. And I think you're right. And I think a lot of Blazers fans would agree with you too, that there's something about, it was his time and his team. And now here comes someone else kind of threatening him and man.
Well, not even threatening. It seemed like I'm pretty sure the team, because Dame has a magnetic kind of personality, the freestyles, and he just seems like the camera's drawn to the guy. Even when you watch him play, I mean, he jumps off the screen. While LaMarcus is, he's 6'11", but he's out there, shooting 18 footers, kind of a weak rebounder. I'm surprised when he grabs 10 and you're kind of surprised. Doesn't block shots. Yeah, he's not a very, it was really fun to watch him in the first 2 games against that Houston series and then the first couple of games against OKC, because, I mean, when he's on, it's fun, but he's not on very often.
Well, and not to turn this into a LaMarcus Aldridge therapy session for Blazers fans, but I mean, one thing that I hated about LaMarcus Aldridge when he'd make the All-Star game, and it was like, talk about someone who was not meant to be in an All-Star game, and he'd score like 4 points and look completely awkward and just wasn't looking like he was having a good time at all. But yeah, I mean, good luck to LaMarcus. I hope he finds the success he's looking for, and very happy with the team now for sure.
Hey, I wasn't shocked when he went off the first 2 games against OKC for San Antonio, and then he just kind of petered off, because that's him in a nutshell to me personally.
Classic LaMarcus.
James, man, I want to thank you very much for bringing it tonight, especially there at the end with LaMarcus Aldridge, and I want to extend another thank you for staying on as long as you did tonight and suffering through the technical difficulties. I know the Blazers Edge listeners are really going to appreciate. So again, I just want to give you an opportunity to say where they can find you on Twitter.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter. It's Snotty Drippin'. Just take Scottie Pippen and then spell it so it sounds like Snotty Drippin'. And then check us out on B-Ball Breakdown. I'm the weak link there. We have a lot of really good guys who know their stuff, and we bring quality content every day. So check us out.
All right, thanks for coming on, man. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, man. I also want to thank myself for showing the wherewithal. I brought it tonight. The grit. I brought it every play, man. All right, guys. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks again. And we are all done with episode 138 of the Blazers Edge podcast. I'd like to thank you very much for listening today. And I'd also like to thank B-Ball Breakdown contributor James Holas for coming on the show and tolerating us through all of the technical difficulties that we put him through. All told on a Friday night that took us looks like 2 hours to get that podcast recorded and everything. So thank you to James for being so gracious with his time this week.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to James for his patience. You can find him on Twitter at SnottyDrippin'. And as always, our intro and outro beats are brought to you by Odar. You can check out his work at soundcloud.com/OdarBeats. Feel free to check in with the Blazers Edge midweek podcast coming up in a few days with managing editor Dave Deckard and contributor Dan Meringue. And for weekend podcast host Chris Lucia, I am Brandon Goldner. And remember, before you record a podcast, make sure that your computer will not break in the middle of it.